Many federal workers have been encouraged to quit. Over 100,000 federal employees have resigned under the resignation program, which places them on paid administrative leave until the end of September. But some agencies, they mess this up by rejecting resignations or by adding words that make workers question it. How will this impact you? Let's get into it. Many civilian employees at the Department of Defense had a chance to resign through the deferred resignation program. Not once, but twice. And this latest agreement would have employees placed on administrative leave starting May 1st. That would give them 5 full months so that they could look for another job, so that they could pivot, maybe transition, start preparing for early retirement, whatever their situation was. Now, during this time, one of the appeals is you receive your full pay and benefits. Benefits to include your leave. You are still gaining leave during this time period. And at the end, September 30th, they cash out your leave. But here's the problem. Some people are still waiting to be emailed their separation agreement. That agreement comes in, you review it, sign it, your supervisor signs it, and in some situations, a third party needs to sign it. And then you are provided a copy of that agreement. Now, that hasn't gone out to everyone just yet. For employees that have already received their agreements, they're reviewing it, they're reading through there, they notice there's some clauses tucked in there. There's some special language. Now, first the contract says you will accrue annual and sick leave until your separation date, and then you can cash out your annual leave. But it specifically says it's subject to the availability of funds. In other words, we'll pay you if we have the cash. And the interesting thing about this is if you look across the government at other agencies, their DRP agreements, a lot of them, they don't include this language. So why did the Department of Defense include it in their agreements? Here's a few reasons. Number one, federal budget constraints. Flexibility if funds run low. 2, legal protection. It protects the government from obligation. And 3, contingency planning to avoid lawsuits or grievances. Now, when you first look at this, when you first read it, it looks a little suspicious. But I believe the intent of the Department of Defense is to pay people what they owe people. So if you're sitting there on an unused leave balance and it's your last pay period, they should be cashing you out. I don't have any doubt that they'll do it. I think what happened here is a lawyer raised their hand during a meeting and say, oh, we have to include this to cover the agency. Now, when it comes to your payout, that's only going to be annual leave. Your sick leave isn't getting cashed out. In fact, your sick leave is essentially useless unless you come back into the government. So if you were to leave, let's say 3 or 4 years and then come back as a federal worker, then your sick leave should be there for you. So if you have like 200 hours, that should all remain if you decide to come back. If not, it's useless. Another clause states, by signing this, you give up your right to sue the Pentagon or take any action against them forever. There's no claims for back pay. There's no lawsuit for reinstatement. You're giving up some of your legal standing when you sign a document like this. This is one of the reasons a lot of people had attorneys review it, or at least they took it to a union representative so they can look at it. Because they were worried they signed this, maybe they get a horrible performance review out the door. And it's because of retaliation. And now there's nothing that you can do as a civil service employee. You just have to take it. And because bureaucracy loves extra hoops, you have to notify your local ethics officer within 3 days if you decide to take another job. Now with DoD, it's more serious because a lot of people in the federal government, they look at contracting. They look at jumping to the defense contracting. And that might not be able to happen as you're technically still a federal employee. Could be a conflict of interest. But there are some reasons why you could take a job like that. That's if your federal duties have zero overlap with the contractor's interest. You're not influencing or participating in contracts related to the contractor, and you work for a different division or agency within the federal system or contractor space with no conflicting interest. Some people have done it successfully, but you should understand that, yeah, contracts are being cut too, so there might not be that much stability on the other side of the fence. Now, as a federal employee, you probably already made your decision when it comes to the DRP. So you either took the DRP, you took early retirement or VSIP, you're expecting severance with a RIF, or you're just trying to keep your job. DoD is trying to get rid of 5 to 8% of their total workforce. That equates to tens of thousands of federal employees. And some people believe that the more that people take the DRP, that they resign voluntarily and they leave the agency, then perhaps that will save jobs. There's federal employees in the agency that desperately need or want their job, and every time someone raises their hand and volunteers, hey, I'll go ahead and resign, that could potentially save jobs. So that's how it's being looked at by a lot of people, especially if you combine the people that take the DRP and also the loss from the attrition. They're losing thousands of people from the attrition, and then you have early retirement. Maybe the rifts will not be that deep for DoD. But there were some DRP denials to include mission essential positions, unfulfilled service obligations, and poor communication, meaning people didn't get informed in time to make a decision. Now, let's stay with DoD and talk about the Pentagon scandal, or rather scandals, because Pete Hegseth, he's at it again with the Signal app. This is the second time with the Signal app, and then you have this rant that recently was posted on social media. Back in March, Pete Hegseth allegedly shared sensitive details about U.S. military operations against the Houthis in Yemen, except it wasn't through a secure Pentagon system. So the first time was when they invited that journalist to be a part of critical details about an airstrike. And the second time, he's got a friends and family text group to include his brother, his wife, and his personal lawyer. And he's sharing more personal details with that group. So what's the problem with Signal? It's secure, right? Well, yeah, but it's not DoD approved for classified information. If you spend a day in the military, you know this is an OPSEC no-no. OPSEC is operational security, and even the lowest ranking service member, as they're walking down the hallways, as they're using the bathroom, you see posters up there, and it says things like, loose lips sink ships. It's constantly reinforcing the message that you do not share sensitive information or classified information using systems that are not approved. You know, even in like low-level military units, you have something called NIPRNet. You have something called SIPRNet. SIPR is for classified information. NIPR is not. So you would think that the top of the Department of Defense would understand and would conform to those standards. So this has got a lot of people questioning Hegseth's judgment. Representative Adam Smith said we need answers and filed a resolution of inquiry to force an investigation. But the Republican majority in the House, led by Mike Johnson, shut it down, passed a rule blocking it. Smith called it a move to frustrate democracy, and Johnson called it a waste of time to avoid political stunts. And it's not just the House, this is happening in the Senate too. Senator Jack Reed also called for an investigation, but the Republicans on the Armed Service Committee, silent. They voted down every related amendment without saying a word. Why does this matter? Congress is supposed to oversee the Pentagon, and by blocking those inquiries, it weakens the power. Now, it's clear that the president enjoys having Pete Hegseth as his Secretary of Defense. So how much leeway will he be given? Speaking of Pete, he jumped on Twitter earlier this week and went off about the Women, Peace, and Security Program, or WPS. He called it woke. Biden era. He said the troops hated it. He was celebrating the fact that he was the one to dismantle it. Except it wasn't created under Biden. In fact, President Trump signed it into law during his first term in 2017. And what does this do? This advances women in the role of conflict prevention, military operations and peacekeeping, humanitarian aid, and post-conflict recovery. The reason for this is when you're in a foreign country, let's say Iraq or Afghanistan, and you're given the mission to go in and search for contraband, or you're looking for somebody, so you're kicking doors down. When you enter in someone's residence, when you enter in someone's house, let's say, you have to search everyone there. There are women part of that household. It doesn't look good when a male soldier searches a female local national. In fact, it's against their culture. So the most ideal thing you can do in order to lower the tension level, in order to prevent conflict, is to have a female there that's trained in searching or even interrogating or questioning or interacting with the female members of that household. They don't want to talk to the men. So this is something that's been in practice for multiple years. We've been using a lot of women in this role. General Kane told Congress this month that WPS helped troops in battle. He said female team members could connect with women and kids in ways male soldiers couldn't. On top of that, the WPS Act was co-sponsored by you know who? Marco Rubio, who's now the Secretary of State. And it was written by who's the current Secretary of Department of Homeland Security, Christie. And it was even celebrated by Ivanka Trump in 2019. Senator Shaheen said Hegseth has no idea what he's doing. Now, in the midst of all that, we now have Congress threatening to reduce federal pensions even further. That's one of the main reasons that people are attracted into the public sector is the hope and promise of a federal pension. So that's going to be reduced. If you want to know more about that, check this video out next. Stay updated by signing up to the free newsletter down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.